The sound of the key in the lock was always precise. Julian's towel, a sharp metallic scrape, followed by a confident, decisive click. 7:43 p.m., 17 minutes later than his texted ETA. My mind, a silent abacus, calculated the variables. Traffic was clear tonight. The distance from his office to our front door was a fixed constant. 17 minutes, therefore, was an unscheduled stop, or a scheduled one he had failed to mention. It made no difference. Both were data points. I didn't move from my position in the wingback chair in the living room. The book in my lap was a prop, its spine uncreased. My gaze was fixed on the middle distance, where the clean, minimalist lines of our home were swallowed by the encroaching twilight outside the plate glass windows. This house, Julian called it our sanctuary. A monument to his success, I called it a cage. A beautifully appointed, brutally sterile cage with excellent acoustics. I could hear the soft sigh of his leather briefcase being placed on the marble-topped console in the foyer, the gentle rustle of his cashmere overcoat being hung. Each sound was a note in a familiar and now grating symphony. Kira. His voice echoed slightly in the cavernous, open-plan space. I allowed a beat of silence to pass, let him feel the space. Let him wonder where I was in the shadows, and hear Julian. My voice was calm, level, the voice of a wife waiting for her husband. It was a role I had perfected. He appeared in the arched doorway, a silhouette against the brighter light of the hall. He was handsome, I could still admit that, in a detached, analytical way, like admiring a piece of classical sculpture. Perfect proportions, a strong jaw, hair that was artfully styled to look effortlessly tousled. He was a man designed to be looked at, a man who thrived on it. Reading in the dark? He asked, his tone a soft, chiding caress. He flicked a switch, and a series of recessed lights cast soft, strategic pools of illumination across the room, catching the gloss on the dark wood floors. He had designed the lighting scheme himself. Of course he had. Everything had to be his design. My eyes were adjusting. I lied smoothly. Another data point. Another small, useless lie he wouldn't think to question. He walked over, loosening the knot of his silk tie. He smelled of expensive cologne and something else, something floral and sweet. Not my perfume. How was your day? He asked. The perfunctory question of a man obligated to ask it, quiet, productive. I closed the book and placed it on the small table beside me. And yours? He sighed, a theatrical exhalation of manufactured stress. He ran a hand through his perfect hair. Incredible. Tense, but incredible. We're on the verge of something massive, Key. Truly massive. I waited. I was an excellent waiter. My entire career, before I had paused it for him, was built on waiting, on watching algorithms, predicting market fluctuations, and knowing the precise moment to strike. Patience is not a virtue. It is a weapon. The Axiom partnership? I prompted, keeping my tone one of polite interest. He beamed, and for a moment, a handsome sculpture seemed animated with genuine passion. More than a partnership, a merger, a new entity. Isolde is a visionary. She sees what I see. We're going to reshape the entire logistics tech space. Isolde, there it was, the name, Isolde Belmont. I had already compiled the dossier. Her photo was clipped to the top of the file on my encrypted drive. Elegant. Powerful. With a decadent smile that hinted at an appetite for more than just market share. The floral perfume suddenly had a name. That's wonderful, Julian, I said. And the lie tasted like ash in my mouth. He walked to the bar cart, a monstrosity of chrome and smoked glass that he adored. He poured himself a generous measure of scotch. He didn't offer me one. He hadn't for months. It was a small omission, a subtle shift in the tectonic plates of our marriage. But I had registered the tremor. He took a sip, turning to face me, the crystal tumbler cradled in his hand like an orb of power. The curated lighting caught the amber of the liquid. "It is wonderful," he said, his voice dropping into a more serious register. "And it's going to require everything from me. My complete and undivided attention." My heart rate remained steady at 62 beats per minute. I monitored it out of habit. A biofeedback loop of forced calm. "You've always been dedicated." "This is different," he said, taking another step closer. He was entering my space now, asserting his presence. "This isn't just about me growing the company anymore. This is about building a legacy. Our legacy." He gestured around the sterile room. "This house, our life, it's just the beginning. But to get to the next level, I need to know my foundation is secure. I need to know my home life is perfectly managed." I tilted my head slightly. I thought it was. He gave me that smile again. The one that didn't touch his eyes. The one that dripped with condescension. "It is. You're wonderful at it, darling. But your job?" He let the word hang in the air as if it were something distasteful. "It's a distraction for you and for me. My job, my quiet part-time consultancy and risk analysis for a boutique firm. The one thing I had kept for myself. The one place I wasn't Julian's wife. Where I was just Kaylin, the analyst whose projections were never, ever wrong. He called it my hobby. It's only 20 hours a week, Julian. It's 20 hours where your focus is elsewhere," he countered, his voice smooth as silk wrapping around his demand like velvet around a knife. "I need you here, focused. When I'm entertaining people like Izalda and her team, I need a partner by my side, not a consultant who has to check her emails. We're entering a new social sphere, Kira. It requires a certain commitment. You won't need the money. God knows what I'm about to make will render your little salary utterly obsolete." My little salary. The blood in my veins felt like ice water. My mind, however, was a furnace of activity. It was processing, calculating, the condescension, the mention of Isolde, the demand veiled as a loving request. It was all coalescing into a single, undeniable conclusion. He wasn't just asking me to quit my job. He was asking me to disappear, to become a decorative, silent partner in his life so that the real partner, Isolde, could occupy the professional space beside him. He wanted me to be the foundation, buried and unseen, while they built their empire on top of me. My training. Took over. Never react in the moment of attack. Observe. Gather data. Concede strategically. I let a flicker of, what? Disappointment? Hurt? Cross my face. I let my shoulders slump just a fraction. A performance of capitulation? "I see," I said, my voice a carefully constructed whisper. He seized on it, pressing his. "Advantage." "I knew you would," he said, his voice softening, becoming magnanimous in his victory. He came over and crouched in front of my chair, taking my hands in his. His skin was warm, mine was cold. "Think of it, Kira. No more deadlines, no more pointless reports. You can focus on this house, on us. We can travel. You'll be the envy of everyone. You will be a beautiful object in my display case." That's what he meant. I looked into his handsome, earnest, lined face. The floral scent was stronger up close. It clung to the lapel of his suit. My mind was already leagues ahead of him, the plan unfurling like a blueprint, the shell corporations I maintained, the portfolio he never knew I had, built from the seed money of an inheritance my parents had insisted be placed in a trust under my name only. The Phoenix Fund, I called it. Money I had quietly, brilliantly grown for a day I had hoped would never come. But I was a risk analyst. I always planned for the worst case scenario. And looking at my husband, I knew the worst case. Scenario had just sat down for dinner. I squeezed his hand. a gesture of reassurance, of submission. Okay, Julian, I said softly. My voice was a perfect imitation of a defeated woman. If it's that important to you, for so I would quit my job. Just as he asked, of course I will, darling. My analytical mind was already running the numbers. He thought he was building a legacy. He had no idea he was simply leveraging it for me. He wanted me to focus on our life. And I would focus on dismantling his. I'll call them in the morning, I added. I will make a different call first. He kissed my forehead, the victor seal. That's my girl. He stood up, pleased, triumphant, and utterly oblivious. He walked back to the bar to refresh his drink, his back to me. I watched the straight, confident line of his spine. And in the utter silence of my mind, I began the acquisition process. The next morning, the air was crisp and painfully bright. Julian had left early, a triumphant spring in his step. Big day, key. The first day of the rest of our lives, he had boomed, kissing me with the breezy ownership of a man who believed he'd successfully managed a difficult asset. I smiled. I waved. I closed the door behind him, and the smile fell from my face like a stone. The house was silent again. My cage, but now the bars felt different. They felt like the starting grid. I didn't go to the wingback chair. I went to my study, the one room in the house that was truly mine. Julian found it austere. It contained a desk, a chair, and a triple monitor setup that was a direct link to my real life. My real work, the work he felt was a hobby. At 9 a.m. sharp, I didn't call my boss to quit. I initiated a video conference on a heavily encrypted network. A moment later, a face appeared on my central screen. Mara. Her hair was a practical salt and pepper cut. No makeup. Behind her were shelves of legal binders, not minimalist art. Mara was my lawyer, my financial advisor, and the only person on earth who knew about the Phoenix Fund. Her expression was, as always, no nonsense. Kira, she, said, her voice a gravelly greeting. You're using the Onyx channel? This is either very bad or very good. Which is it? Julian asked me to quit my job last night, I said, my voice flat, relaying the information like a field. Report. Mara's eyebrows shot up. It was the most dramatic expression I'd ever seen her make. He what? After all these years, he's finally getting around to demanding you become a professional hostess? His words were that he needs me focused on our home life. He's merging with Isolde Belmont. Mara let out a low whistle. She swiveled in her chair and typed something on a keyboard out of frame. Isolde Belmont, Belmont Capital. Aggressive, over-leveraged. Rumors of cash flow problems for the last 2 quarters. She needs a lifeline. And Julian is throwing it to her, I said. He's calling it a merger of equals, a new legacy. He's calling it that because he's an egotist, Mara countered bluntly. What he's doing is taking on her debt and her risk profile in exchange for the PR boost of her name. It's a stupid, arrogant move. Vanguard Innovations is solid, but it's not invulnerable. Taking on Belmont's liabilities could sink them both if there's a market downturn. I leaned forward, my fingers steepled. The analytical part of my brain was humming, alive and electric. The dull ache of betrayal was still there, but now it was fuel. It was purpose. That's what I'm counting on. I want to see the numbers, Mara. All of them. I want to see Vanguard's debt structure, who holds their paper. I want to see the preliminary merger agreements. You still have our source inside their general counsel's office? Mara's expression shifted from surprise to a slow, dawning comprehension. A thin smile touched her lips. He's been complaining about his bonus for 3 months. I imagine he's feeling very cooperative. So this isn't a my husband is a bastard call. This is a liquidate the Phoenix Fund call. This is a activate the Phoenix Fund call. I corrected her gently. Liquidation is too simple. I don't want to just cash out. I want to buy in. Silence. Mara stared at me through the screen, her sharp mind processing the implications. Buy in? You mean purchase a minority stake? Rattle his cage from the inside? No, I said. The word was cold. Hard. Final. I don't want a stake. I want the whole thing. I want Vanguard Innovations. I want the company he is building with her to become mine. He told me my job was a distraction. I'm about to make it my full-time occupation. Mara leaned back, a look of profound and slightly terrified respect in her eyes. Jesus, Kira, you're not planning a divorce. You're planning a corporate raid. He made it corporate the moment he decided my value was best realized as his chief entertainer, I stated. He wants me to quit my job. Fine, I'll need something to occupy my time. I've decided my new hobby will be owning my husband's company. For the next 4 hours, we worked. The plan was audacious, borderline impossible, but founded on one simple principle Julian had always preached but never understood. Information is the only currency that matters. He thought money was power. He was wrong. Control over money was power, Mara's source delivered. Encrypted files began to populate a secure server. The merger agreement. Vanguard's current balance sheets. Their list of creditors. And there it was, the weak point. The fatal flaw in Julian's grand design. A significant portion of Vanguard's operating debt was held by a mid-level investment bank, Sterling Coal. And Sterling Coal, according to Mara's real-time data feeds, was in trouble. They had overexposed themselves in the South American market and were desperate to clean up their books before their quarterly earnings call. They needed liquidity. They would be highly motivated to sell their debt Vanguard's debt at a discount. If we acquired the debt, Mara explained, her voice buzzing with the thrill of the chase, we become his creditor, his primary creditor. The merger with Belmont will require new financing, a restructuring of existing debt. As the primary debt holder, we would have to sign off on that. We could block the deal entirely. Blocking isn't enough, I said, my eyes scanning the columns of numbers on the screen. They were like a piece of music I could read perfectly, a symphony of his arrogance and his oversight. He'll just find financing elsewhere. It will be a setback, but he'll recover. I don't want to set him back. I want to checkmate him. What do you have in mind? Mara asked, her pen poised. The debt covenants, I said. Section 4, subsection B, change of control provisions. Julian wrote these agreements himself years ago to protect himself from a hostile takeover. They're ironclad. If any single entity gains control of more than 50% of the company's debt, they have the right to call the entire loan due immediately. Or they have the option to convert the debt to equity. Mara was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the faint hum of my computer. Convert to equity, she breathed. At the valuation set at the time of the agreement. Before the company's recent growth. Precisely, I said. He's so focused on the future value of this new merged company with Isolde, he's forgotten the past. He's forgotten the poison pill he planted in his own garden. Sterling Coal holds 41% of that. 2 other smaller creditors hold another 12% combined. If we, through a series of shell corporations, can acquire all of that paper, we will hold 53% of Vanguard's debt. Mara's face was a mask of awe. You wouldn't just be his creditor, Kira. You would, for all intents and purposes, be his partner. The partner with all the power. No, I said, pulling up the final file. It was the execution order for the Phoenix Fund, a cascade of buy orders, timed and structured to go through 3 different holding companies based in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Untraceable back to me. For now. I looked at the name at the top of the order. The name of the new parent entity that would, by 5 o'clock this evening, own a controlling interest in my husband's future. I won't be his partner. My finger hovered over the execute button. I thought of Julian's triumphant smile, of the scent of Isolde's perfume on his coat, of the phrase my little salary, I'll be his boss. I clicked the mouse. The order was sent. The gears began to turn, silent and massive and unstoppable. Outside, the sun shone brightly on my beautiful cage. But I was no longer inside it. I was watching it on a screen, my finger on the button that controlled the locks. The day was just beginning. And Julian had no idea that the rest of his life had just been bought. The click of the mouse was an absurdly small sound for the magnitude of the action. A whisper that triggered an avalanche. For a few seconds, I did nothing. I simply stared at the confirmation message on the screen. Orders executed. My heart rate, which I had expected to spike, remained a placid 64 beats per minute. The detachment was absolute. A surgeon who has just made the first irrevocable incision. There is no room for emotion now. Only procedure. I spent the next hour monitoring the initial transactions. Shell company Epsilon Tango Holdings acquired Sterling Coal's entire portfolio of Vanguard Innovations debt. The sale was processed with an efficiency that spoke of Sterling Coal's desperation. They didn't question the anonymous buyer. They just saw the wire transfer and signed. Men like them always did. Fear is a greater motivator than curiosity. Simultaneously, Helios Acquisitions and Nix Consolidated, two more phantom entities in my corporate arsenal, approached. The two smaller creditors. Their offers were slightly above market rate, a sweetener to ensure a swift, no-questions-asked transaction. By 11:30 a.m., Mara's secure message blinked in the corner of my screen. It was a single word. Complete. It was done. In the space of a single morning, the Phoenix Fund, through its various arms, had become the majority debt holder of my husband's company. My company now. He just didn't know it yet. I shut down the system, the screens fading to black, reflecting my own impassive face. I left my study and walked into the kitchen. The silence of the house was different now. It was no longer the silence of a cage. It was the silence of a hunting blind. I did what a newly unemployed wife was supposed to do. I made lunch. A simple salad. I ate it slowly, methodically, by the vast kitchen window overlooking the manicured garden. Every leaf on every ornamental shrub was perfectly in its place. Julian paid a service an exorbitant amount to maintain that illusion of effortless perfection. It was an illusion I was about to shatter. The rest of the day was an exercise in restraint. I read the book I used as a prop the night before. This time, I actually processed the words. It was a history of the Byzantine Empire, a sprawling epic of intrigue, betrayal, and emperors being overthrown by those they trusted most. It felt appropriate. At 4:01 p.m., as the markets closed, my personal phone buzzed. It was Mara. "The tremors are starting," she said, her voice tight with professional excitement. Vanguard's CFO just tried to contact Sterling Coal to discuss refinancing terms for the merger. Sterling Coal informed him that they no longer hold the paper. When he asked who the new creditor was, they cited a non-disclosure agreement. He was apoplectic. A small, cold smile touched my lips. Good. Let him be. Let them scramble. Julian will know by now, Mara warned. The CFO will have called him immediately. I know, I said, my eyes drifting to the front door. I'm counting on it. I could almost hear the distant thunder of his world starting to crumble. He was late, not 17 minutes late. An hour and 42 minutes late. The key in the lock wasn't sharp and confident. It was clumsy, fumbled. The click was muted, uncertain. He didn't place his briefcase on the console. It thudded to the floor. His overcoat was thrown over a chair, not hung. The symphony was broken. Dissonance had entered my perfect sterile cage. He found me in the same wingback chair, reading the same book. The picture of domestic tranquility. He, on the other hand, was a mess. His tie was gone, the top two buttons of his shirt undone. His perfect hair was disheveled from where he'd clearly been dragging his hands through it. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and panic. "Did you know?" He barked. The word was an accusation hurled across the room. I looked up slowly, feigning surprise. I bookmarked my page with deliberate care. "Know what, Julian? You look terrible. Is everything all right? Don't play dumb with me, Kira." He snapped, striding into the room. He smelled of stale sweat and fear. The expensive cologne was long gone. Someone bought her debt, all of it. Sterling Cole Fiduciary Trust, all of it. In one morning, I let my expression morph into one of concerned confusion. I was an excellent actress. My whole marriage had been a rehearsal. Bought her debt? What does that mean? Is that bad? His jaw worked, grinding his teeth. He was looking at me, but his eyes were seeing conspiracies. "Is it bad?" he mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, Kira, it's bad. It means some hostile entity, some vulture fund, now holds a gun to the company's head. The merger with Isolda, it's dead in the water until we know who they are and what they want. They have to approve the new financing. They could block the whole thing." "Oh, Julian," I said, my voice soft with manufactured sympathy. I stood up and walked toward him. He flinched slightly as I approached. "Interesting, a new data point. Who would do such a thing?" "Who?" He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "It could be anyone, a competitor, a corporate raider. Isolda even suggested." He stopped, looking at me with a new, strange intensity. His panicked mind was casting about for a villain, and the possibilities were clearly terrifying him. He saw sharks everywhere, never guessing the one in his own home. "Suggested what?" I prompted gently. "Nothing. It's insane," he muttered, turning away to pace the room like a caged animal. "My animal and my cage. We can't find out who it is. A series of shell companies, Delaware, Cayman. It's a professional hit. Someone wants to destroy me." I placed a hand on his arm. He stopped pacing, his muscles tense beneath his expensive shirt. "We will figure it out," I said, my voice a soothing balm on his raw nerves. "You're a genius, Julian. You'll find a way. I quit my job today, just like you asked. I'm here for you." "Completely." He looked at me then, his panic momentarily subsiding, replaced by a flicker of his old arrogance. He saw the compliant wife, the support system, the one stable thing in his suddenly chaotic world. He exhaled, pulling me into a hug. It was stiff, awkward. I rested my head on his chest, my expression a perfect blank. I could feel the frantic, rabbit-quick beating of his heart. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. "You're right," he whispered into my hair. "You're right. I'll fix this. I just need to think. It's probably just some vulture fund looking for a quick payout. We'll offer them a premium. We'll buy them out." "You can't afford it," I thought, a cold, hard certainty in my mind. "I made sure of that. Whatever you need," I murmured. We stood there for a long moment, the liar and the destroyer, locked in a meaningless embrace. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Julian was a man possessed. He was on the phone constantly, his voice shifting from rage to pleading, to threats. He and his CFO, a perpetually sweating man named Gerald, held marathon meetings in the study, my study, which I had graciously vacated for them. They were trying to trace the ownership of the shell companies, hitting brick wall after brick wall erected by Mura's legal team. Isolde called constantly. I would answer the house phone with a polite, wifely Vanguard residence. and her voice, sharp and demanding, would ask for Julian. I could hear the impatience, the cooling of her enthusiasm for the merger. She was a predator, and she could smell weakness on Julian like blood in the water. I, meanwhile, played my part to perfection. I made coffee. I brought them sandwiches. They didn't eat. I'd ask Julian how it was going, and he would wave me away with a distracted, "It's complicated, Kira." "Oh, I know," I'd think. I designed the complication. The evening of the second day, Mara sent another message. "It's time. They've called an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow. They're going to try and push through a resolution to issue new stock, dilute the value, and force our hand." I replied with 2 words. "See you there?" That night, Julian was a ghost at the dinner table. He pushed his food around his plate, his eyes staring at nothing. "We have a plan," he said, more to himself than to me. "A long shot, but it's a way out." "I'm sure it's a brilliant one," I said. Taking a delicate sip of my wine, he finally looked at me, a glimmer of the old Julian returning. "I need you to do something for me tomorrow." My heart remained steady. "Of course. I need you to not be here. Go shopping. Go to a spa. I've already put the car service on standby for you. Take the corporate card. I have the board coming here for a crisis meeting. It's going to be tense, and I don't want you caught in the middle of it." He wasn't protecting me. He was embarrassed. He didn't want me to witness his humiliation, his desperation. He wanted to maintain the illusion of the infallible provider, the master of the universe. I smiled, a slow, gentle curve of my lips. It was the most genuine smile I had given him in years. "Whatever you think is best, darling." The next morning, I dressed with the care of a soldier preparing for a decisive battle, not a pantsuit, not the severe analyst. Today required something else. I chose a sheath dress in a deep blood red. It was impeccably tailored, severe in its cut, but utterly commanding. I wore heels that made a sharp, definitive click on the hardwood floors. My hair was pulled back in a sleek, tight chignon. My makeup was minimal but stark. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see Julian's wife. I did not see a hobbyist consultant. I saw the CEO of the Phoenix Fund at the car service he'd ordered was waiting at 8:30 a.m. I walked out, got in, and smiled at the driver. "Change of plans," I said, my voice crisp. "We're not going to the city. We're going to Vanguard Innovations Tower, the main entrance, please." I arrived at 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to start in the main boardroom. The one with the panoramic view of the city, his view. As I walked through the lobby, past the large brushed steel Vanguard Innovations logo, a few employees stared. They recognized me as the boss's wife, the quiet, elegant woman who appeared at the annual Christmas party. They would remember this day differently. Mara was waiting for me by the elevators, a leather portfolio in her hand. She wore a dark navy suit, her face an unreadable mask of legal professionalism. She gave me a single sharp nod. "They're all in there," she said quietly. Julian, Gerald, the 2 other board members, and Isolde Belmont is there, at Julian's invitation, apparently. "A united front, a circular firing squad," I corrected. "Are you ready?" "Kira," Mara said, her voice dropping. "Lower. I'm a lawyer. I live for this." We took the elevator to the top floor. The doors opened onto a silent, carpeted reception area outside the boardroom. Julian's executive assistant, a young woman named Chloe, looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Maxwell, I wasn't expecting you." "The board is in session." "I know," I said, not breaking my stride. "They're expecting us." I didn't knock. I pushed the heavy glass door open. The conversation inside stopped instantly. 6 faces turned towards the door. Julian was at the head of the long, polished table, a diagram scrawled on the whiteboard behind him. He saw me, and his face, already pale, lost its remaining color. He looked confused, as if his brain couldn't process my presence here. "Kira," he stammered, "what are you doing?" "I told you to go out today." I ignored him. My gaze swept the table. Gerald, the CFO, sweating profusely. Two older board members, looking bewildered. And at the far end, Isolde Belmont. She was exactly as she looked in her file. Chic, poised, her intelligent eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. She was the first to understand that this was not a social call. "Julian," I said, my voice calm and clear, echoing slightly in the stunned silence of the room. "You're in my seat." Mara stepped forward, placing her portfolio on the table with a soft thud. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the full weight of legal authority. "My name is Mara Jensen. I am General Counsel for Epsilon Tango Holdings and its affiliated entities, which, as of 9 a.m. on Tuesday, became the majority debt holder of Vanguard Innovations." Julian shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What is this? Who the hell are you people?" "We," Mara said, with a slight gesture toward me, "are your new bank, and we are here to discuss the terms of your debt, specifically the flagrant breach of the change of control covenants outlined in Section 4, subsection B of your loan agreements. We will not be approving your proposed stock dilution. In fact, we are formally blocking the merger with Belmont Capital." Isolde didn't flinch, but a muscle in her jaw tightened. She looked from Mara to me, her eyes cold and analytical. She was recalculating. Julian's face was a storm of crimson rage and utter confusion. He looked at me, truly looked at, and as if for the first time, he saw the dress, the posture, the cold fire in my eyes. The pieces began to click into place in his mind, but the picture they formed was so monstrous, so impossible, he couldn't accept it. "Kira, what does this have to do with you?" he asked, his voice a choked whisper. I walked slowly, deliberately, around the table, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. I stopped beside him, so close I could feel the heat of his anger. "You asked me to quit my job." "Julian," I said, my voice low, for his ears only. "You told me it was a distraction. You said I should focus on something more productive, so I did." I turned to address the room. Epsilon Tango Holdings, Helios Acquisitions, and Nix Consolidated are all wholly owned subsidiaries of a single private fund. I let the silence hang for a beat. I looked directly at my husband, his world, his legacy, his future, all of it resting on this single point. "The fund," I announced, my voice ringing with absolute clarity, "is called the Phoenix Fund, and I am its sole director." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a final devastating whisper. Against his ear, "You wanted me to stop working for other people, so I decided to work for myself. And my first official act was buying your company." The silence that followed my words was not empty. It was a physical presence in the room, heavy and suffocating. It was the sound of a world ending. "Julian's world." He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, shallow mask of disbelief. His eyes, which had always held a spark of arrogant certainty, were now just blank, dark pools of shock. He shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor. "No," he whispered. The word was a puff of air, devoid of conviction. "No, you're lying. This is a joke. A sick, twisted joke." He turned his wild gaze to the other board members, a desperate appeal for allies. "She's my wife. She doesn't know anything about this. Tell them, Gerald. This is impossible." Gerald, the CFO, looked as though he might spontaneously liquefy. He mopped his brow with a trembling hand, his eyes darting between Julian and the leather portfolio Mara had placed on the table. He looked at the hard legal reality of the documents, and then at me. He chose silence. It was Isolde Belmont who broke the spell. She hadn't moved a muscle. She simply sat there, observing me with the cool, detached curiosity of a biologist studying a new and fascinating predator. Her voice when she spoke was like ice. "Let me see if I have this correct, Mrs. Maxwell," she said, completely ignoring Julian's outburst. "You have acquired a controlling interest in Vanguard's debt, and you are now choosing to exercise the covenants of that debt?" "That is correct, Miss Belmont," I replied, my voice even. I met her gaze across the long, polished cable. In that moment, we were the only two people in the room who truly mattered. The men were just spectators to a power shift they couldn't comprehend. And the conversion option? Isolde pressed, her eyes glinting. Section 4, subsection B, a debt for equity swap at the valuation set at the time of the agreement. That would be the 2019 valuation, if I recall. You recall correctly, Mara interjected, stepping forward. She opened her portfolio and slid a document across the table. Based on the 2019 valuation of $150 million and the total debt now held by my clients. Fund. The conversion gives the Phoenix Fund a 51.5% controlling stake in Vanguard Innovations. 51.5%. The number hung in the air, brutal and absolute. Julian made a strangled sound, a mix of a gasp and a sob. 51. He finally turned his full attention back to me, and the shock in his eyes was curdling into a dark, venomous rage. My money, you used my money for this. He snarled, and there it was. The flash of raw emotion I had kept banked for so long surged forward, a white-hot flame. My calm facade didn't crack, but my voice, when I replied, was lethally cold. Your money? I repeated, the words perfectly articulated. Julian, you have never once asked me about my finances. You never wondered about the inheritance my parents left me. You just assumed it was a trivial amount, something for my little hobbies. You saw what you wanted to see. A dependent, an accessory. I took a step closer to him. The Phoenix Fund was built with my money, grown with my expertise, and used to purchase my company. You have had nothing to do with any of it. I'll fight you, he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. I'll take you to every court in the country. I'll tell them you're insane. I'll divorce you. I'll take everything. Will you? Mara asked, her tone dry as dust. You signed a prenuptial agreement that you yourself drafted, Mr. Maxwell. It meticulously shields your assets from your wife. And of course, her assets from you. At the time, your assets were considerably larger. That is no longer the case. As for everything else, she gestured to the pile of documents. This is not a marital dispute. This is a legally executed corporate acquisition. Your personal relationship is, I'm afraid, entirely irrelevant. Every word was a nail in his coffin. He stood there, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. He was a king who had just discovered his castle was made of sand, and the tide was coming in. He had lost. He knew it. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, gaping void. I let the silence stretch, allowing the full weight of his defeat to settle upon him. Then I addressed the room again, my voice returning to its cool, executive tone. The merger with Belmont Capital is terminated, effective immediately. My CFO will be in touch with you, Ms. Belmont, to settle any outstanding contractual obligations. Isolde actually gave me a thin, appreciative smile. She stood up, smoothing down her designer dress. A pity, she said, though she sounded anything but. It seems I backed the wrong horse. She looked at Julian, her expression one of utter contempt. Then her eyes shifted back to me. It has been illuminating, Mrs. Maxwell. She gave a slight nod, a gesture of respect from one queen to another, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. "Gerald," I said, turning to the sweating CFO, "you and the other board members are dismissed. My legal team will be in touch to schedule a transition meeting for tomorrow morning at 10. Do not be late." They scrambled to their feet, avoiding eye contact with Julian, and scurried out of the room like frightened mice. The heavy glass door hissed shut behind them, leaving the two of us alone. Alone in the cavernous boardroom, with the entire city spread out behind the windows behind me. His kingdom, my battlefield. He stood there for a long time, not moving, not speaking. He looked small in the vast room, diminished. The power suit that had always made him seem larger than life now hung on him like a costume. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, broken. "Why?" It was the only word he had left. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the sprawling metropolis below. The view was breathtaking, a testament to ambition and power. "You asked me that before," I said without turning around, "and the answer is the same. You did this, Julian. You just weren't smart enough to see it. I loved you," he said, his voice cracking. It was a pathetic, desperate gambit, an appeal to a history he had already torched. I turned around slowly to face him. "No, you loved the idea of me. You loved having a beautiful, intelligent wife who was just successful enough to be a credit to you, but not so successful she might overshadow you. You loved a wife who would manage your home, organize your social life, and look good on your arm at fundraisers. The moment I threatened to be more than that, the moment my life, my work, became an inconvenience to your grand plans with your new partner, you tried to put me back in my box." I began to walk toward him, my steps measured and deliberate. "You asked me to quit my job, to give up the last piece of my identity that was solely mine. You called my career, a little salary, a distraction. You didn't just disrespect me, Julian. You tried to erase me. You thought I was just another one of your assets to be managed and deployed as you saw fit." I stopped, directly in front of him. I saw the tears welling in his eyes. They did not move me. They were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "You're a risk analyst, Kira," he pleaded, his voice soft. "You understand risk. This is madness. You'll destroy the company, our company." "My company," I corrected him, the words sharp and precise. "And I am a risk analyst, and I have analyzed you. You are arrogant, you are impulsive, and your decision to merge with an over-leveraged company like Delmont Capital for the sake of your ego was a catastrophic risk to my asset. So I mitigated it." I leaned in closer. "You see, you were right about one thing. My part-time job was a distraction. I was playing in the minor leagues to keep you comfortable. You demanded I quit, so I did. Now I'm going pro." He flinched as if I had struck him. He finally seemed to understand. This wasn't about passion or revenge in a way he could comprehend. This was a correction, a balancing of the books. He was a liability I had just neutralized. What are you going to do?" he stammered. "Fire me?" I almost smiled. It was so predictable, so simple. "No, firing you is too easy. It would allow you to become a martyr, to tell everyone about your crazy, vindictive wife who stole your company. No, your punishment needs to be far more appropriate." I walked past him and went to the head of the table, to the large leather throne of a chair that had been his. I ran my hand over the back of it before turning to face him. "You're going to stay on," I said. His head snapped up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I extinguished it immediately. "You have a new title. Vice President of Special Projects. You will report directly and only to me. Your first special project will be to personally oversee the orderly and complete dissolution of the Vanguard Belmont merger agreement. You will handle all the paperwork. You will take all the angry calls from her investors. You will unwind the dream you were so proud of, piece by painful piece. He stared at me, his face a canvas of horror. He understood. It was a prison sentence, a daily ritual of humiliation, administered by the woman he had discarded. You will continue to work out of your old office. On the floor below, I continued, my voice devoid of any emotion. I will be taking this one. The view is much better from up here. I paused, letting the finality of the statement sink in. Your salary will be adjusted to reflect your new, reduced responsibilities. I trust that won't be an issue. After all, I gave him a cold, empty smile. You have me to support you now. I finally sat down in the chair. It felt right. The city spread before me, a kingdom of glass and steel, glittering in the morning light. It was quiet. It was orderly. I had taken his chaos and forged it into my crown. Julian just stood there, a ghost in his own life, as I swiveled the chair to face my new empire. The work was just beginning. He did not reply. He simply stood there, a hollowed-out man in an expensive suit, stripped bare in the heart of the kingdom he thought was his. He turned finally and walked towards the door, not with the proud stride of a CEO, but with the shuffling, hesitant gait of a prisoner being led from the courtroom. The heavy glass door hissed open and then closed, sealing me inside. My new domain. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just sat in the stillness, listening to the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the building around me. The air conditioning, the distant drone of the city, the thrum of 1,000 lives playing out in the towers I could see from my window. The adrenaline of the confrontation receded, leaving behind not elation, not joy, but a vast, cold clarity. The revenge was complete. The emotion of it, the white-hot rage that had fueled me, had burned itself out, leaving behind the hard, glittering ash of purpose. I had not just conquered a company. I had acquired a massive, complex system full of liabilities, assets, and hundreds of employees whose livelihoods now rested on my shoulders. The war was over. The occupation had just begun. My fingers found the console on the desk, a sleek integrated touchscreen that controlled the room's functions. With a tap, I dialed Mara's secure line. She answered on the first ring. He's gone, Sad, my voice flat. I saw him, Mara replied. He didn't take the elevator to the lobby. He went down one floor. To his old office? Good, I said. Let him sit there. Let him contemplate his new reality. I swiveled the chair to face the window again. The view was dizzying, intoxicating. What's next, Mara? The legal checklist. First, formal notification to the SEC of the change in majority ownership and directorship. I have the paperwork drafted. Second, a communique to the board solidifying your position and outlining the legal framework of the transition. They'll fall in line. Their fiduciary duty is to the company, not to Julian. Third, we lock down all executive-level financial authorizations. All capital expenditures above $10,000 now require your direct signature. Gerald is already locked out. He can't even approve a new coffee machine right now. Excellent, I said. My mind was already moving, processing, organizing. This was familiar territory. Taming chaos. Imposing order. Get me the master personnel files for all department heads and vice presidents. And full access to the operational dashboards. All of them. Not the sanitized versions Julian showed the board. I want raw data. Project velocity, burn rates, departmental overhead. Everything. It's already being funneled to your secure server, Mara said. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. She was a builder. A woman who loved a solid legal structure, and we were building a fortress. Kira, are you all right? The question caught me off guard. It was so human. A variable I hadn't accounted for. I'm the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation, I stated, the words feeling foreign and yet perfectly natural on my tongue. I'm precisely where I need to be. It was the truth, or at least the only truth that mattered. Now, after the call, I took a moment. I stood up and walked the length of the office. It was decorated in Julian's taste. Masculine, ostentatious. A large, abstract painting full of angry slashes of color dominated one wall. A series of framed magazine covers featuring Julian Innovator of the Year, the man who reinvented logistics, adorned another. Trophies to his ego, I went to the wall of magazine covers. One by one, I took them down, the metallic. Clink of the frames loud in the quiet room. I didn't look at his smiling, confident face. I simply stacked them neatly on the floor, face down. I would have them removed later. The past was no longer relevant. Then I buzzed the outer desk. "Chloe," I said, my voice calm and even. "Could you come in, please?" A moment. Later, the executive assistant entered. She was young, efficient, and currently looked like a fawn trapped in the headlights of an oncoming train. She clutched a tablet to her chest like a shield. She didn't know what to call me. She didn't know where to look. Double quotes, Mrs. Max. She started, then stopped. "Ma'am." "Kira is fine," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite the desk. "Please sit." She perched on the edge of it, her posture ramrod straight. "Chloe, I understand this is an unexpected transition. I want to be clear. Your position is secure. I value talent and efficiency, and my file indicates you possess both in abundance." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "Thank you, Kira." "I have new protocols," I continued, my tone crisp. "First, all of Julian's Mr. Maxwell's standing appointments are canceled. All of them. His access to the corporate jet, the executive credit lines, and the company town car are suspended pending review." "Is that clear?" "Yes," she whispered. "Second, my schedule is to be managed with absolute precision. I will have a standing meeting with Mara Jensen at 8 a.m. every morning. A standing meeting with the department heads every Friday. At noon. No exceptions. All other meeting requests are to be filtered through you. I am interested in data, not discussion. If a request is not accompanied by a one-page summary with clear metrics and objectives, it is to be denied." Chloe's eyes widened slightly. She was used to Julian's style management by charisma, long lunches, backslapping deals made. On the golf course, I was introducing a clinical, brutal efficiency she had never encountered. She nodded, her fingers flying across the screen of her tablet, taking notes. "Third," I said, leaning forward slightly, "discretion. The goings-on in this office are to be treated with the same level of confidentiality as state secrets. Your loyalty is to this office and to the CEO who occupies it." "That is me. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am," she said, her voice firmer this time. She was a survivor. She understood power. "Absolutely." "Good," I said, leaning back. "That will be all for now. Please have a pot of black coffee sent up. And get me the financials on Project Chimera." "Right away," she said, standing and all but fleeing the room. She hadn't asked what Project Chimera was. She knew. It was Julian's secret. Passion project. A high-risk, high-cost venture into drone delivery systems that he had poured company money into. Another monument to his ego. And the first thing I was going to cut. For the rest of the day, I worked. I submerged myself in data and spreadsheets and logistics chains and personnel reports. The angry painting and the empty hooks on the wall faded into the background. There was only the work. The numbers told a story of a company with solid fundamentals that was being slowly poisoned by its CEO's vanity. Risky side projects, bloated executive expense accounts, redundant management layers created to reward loyalty rather than performance. I saw it all. and I began to draft the plan to excise the rot. At 5:30, a hesitant knock came at my door. It was Julian. He stood in the doorway, looking lost. He held a single file in his hand. "What is it?" I asked, not looking up from my screen. The preliminary paperwork," he said, his voice strained. "For the Belmont dissolution, it requires your signature as CEO." "Put it on the desk," I said. He walked forward and placed the file on the corner of the vast mahogany desk, as far away from me as possible. The space between us felt like a mile-wide chasm. "Is that all?" I asked, my eyes still fixed on a column of figures. "Yes," he said. He didn't leave. Are you coming home?" The question was so absurd, so laden with the wreckage of our shared life, that I had to stop myself from laughing. I finally looked up at him. He looked tired, beaten. "Our home is a legal asset, currently under review like all others," I said, my voice cold and flat. "I will be staying in my office tonight. There's work to be done." "You're dismissed, Julian." He flinched at the use of his name, the casual, dismissive authority of it. He turned and walked away, a man with no power, no company, and now no home to retreat to. He was just a ghost haunting the halls of a life that was no longer his. The first week was a silent, brutal war of attrition. The news of the takeover had ripped through the company, creating waves of panic, gossip, and fear. I was a ghost, a myth, the C-suite phantom who had deposed the king. I rarely left my office, communicating through concise, data-driven emails and Chloe's surgically precise scheduling. Resistance began to coalesce, as I knew it would. It centered around a man named Marcus Vance, the vice president of sales and Julian's most loyal bulldog. He was a charismatic salesman of the old school, all-steak dinners and firm handshakes. He saw my methods as a sterile academic affront to the way things were done. The challenge came during the first Friday meeting with the department heads. I had presented my preliminary restructuring plan. It involved trimming the fat, including a 10% reduction in the sales department's travel and entertainment budget, which I had identified as being grotesquely inflated. "Kira," Marcus began, his voice a smooth, confident baritone. He was the only one who dared use my first name so casually. "With all due respect, you can't run a sales team from a spreadsheet. Business is built on relationships. Those dinners, those trips, that's where the trust is forged. Cutting that budget is cutting the lifeline of this company." The other VPs murmured in agreement, their faces a mixture of fear and hope that someone was finally pushing back. They looked from him to me, waiting for the explosion. I didn't raise my voice. I simply tapped a command on the tablet in front of me. The large screen at the end of the boardroom lit up with a series of charts and graphs. "You're right, Marcus," I said calmly. "Relationships are important, which is why I took the liberty of cross-referencing your department's expense reports with your client, acquisition and retention data for the past 3 years." The screen now showed a scatter plot. On one axis, the amount spent on a client. On the other, the revenue generated. There was no discernible correlation. In fact, some of the most expensive accounts were the least profitable. "This data," I continued, my voice cutting through the silence, "shows that your top-performing accounts are not the ones you spend the most on. They are the ones who receive the most efficient service and the best logistical support from our operations team. Your highest expenses are linked to clients who are legacy accounts, friends of yours and Julian's, who consistently demand more resources than their revenue justifies." I brought up another slide, a list of names, a list of expenses. "You spent $80,000 last year entertaining the CEO of a company that accounts for less than 0.5% of our annual revenue. Meanwhile, our most profitable new client, a company we acquired 6 months ago, has not received so much as a lunch invitation. Marcus's confident expression had vanished. His face was pale. He was staring at the screen, at the circ. Undeniable numbers that laid his entire philosophy bare. Business isn't just about relationships. Marcus, I said, my gaze sweeping the entire table. It's about results. My way is not about ending relationships. It's about funding the ones that are profitable and terminating the ones that are a liability. The budget cuts are not a suggestion. They are an order. You will reallocate your resources to focus on high growth, high profit accounts. Your quarterly bonus will now be tied not to gross sales, but to net profit margin. Adapt, or you will be replaced. Silence. No one moved. No one breathed. I had not shouted. I had not threatened. I had simply used his own data to dismantle his argument and his authority in front of his peers. I had shown them all that loyalty to the past was a weakness. The future was about the numbers, and I controlled the numbers. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he gave a single curt nod. Understood, he said, the word clipped. The rebellion was over before it had even truly begun. That evening, I finally went home. The house was dark and silent. A cold dinner was waiting for me on the kitchen island, covered in plastic wrap. A peace offering? Or the pathetic routine of a broken man? I didn't care. I threw it away. I found him in the living room, in the wingback chair where this had all begun. He was just sitting in the dark, a silhouette against the window. The board has ratified my position. I said from the doorway, not bothering to turn on the light. Marcus Vance has fallen in line. The company is stabilizing. He didn't turn. Congratulations, he said, his voice flat and dead. You won. This was never a game, I replied, my voice hard. This was a correction. I left him there in the darkness and went upstairs. To the master bedroom. His clothes were gone. They were neatly packed in suitcases by the door to the guest room. A silent surrender. The bed, once our shared space, was now solely mine. I stood there in the center of the vast empty room. I had the company. I had the house. I had the power. I had won everything. And I had never felt so completely and utterly alone. The loneliness was a physical presence, a cold weight in the vast, silent bedroom, but it was also a data point. Emotion, like any other variable, had to be analyzed, quantified, and managed. I had chosen this path. The emotional cost was simply part of the calculation. I did not sleep in the bed that night. Instead, I went to my study, the true seat of my power, and I worked. I worked until the sun came up, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray. Work was the antidote to feeling. It was order. It was control. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of a new, chilling routine. The company, under my clinical guidance, began to transform. I was a surgeon, cutting away the diseased tissue of Julian's vanity. Project Chimera was dismantled, its assets liquidated to fund core operations. Redundant executive positions were eliminated. Performance metrics were implemented across every department. The numbers, for the first time in years, began to trend in the right direction. Profits, though slim, were stabilizing. The bleeding had stopped. I was not. Loved. I did not expect to be. I was respected for my intellect and feared for my ruthlessness. My employees called me the Abacus, a nickname I discovered from a filtered IT report on inter-office communications. I found it fitting. I was cold, I was precise, and I was never, ever wrong. Julian was a ghost. He did his work. The dissolution of the Belmont merger was proceeding, albeit at a glacial pace. He submitted his reports, each one a testament to his own failure, without comment. He was a specter at the edge of my vision, a man I saw in hallways and occasionally in the kitchen of our cold, silent house, He had lost weight. The arrogant fire in his eyes had been replaced by something unnervingly placid. An empty, hollowed out calm. He never argued. He never complained. He simply complied. His surrender was so absolute it was disquieting. It felt like a strategy I did not yet understand. Then the glitches began. They were small things at first. So small, they were easily dismissed as random system errors. A shipment of components logged into inventory an hour late. A server in the Singapore data center rebooting for 3 minutes during a low traffic period. An internal budget report showing a rounding error in the third decimal place that corrected itself the next day. Individually, they were nothing. Statistically, insignificant noise in a complex global operation. But I was an analyst. I didn't believe in noise. I believed in patterns. I began to track the incidents in a private, encrypted file on my personal server. I logged the date, the time, the system affected, the duration of the anomaly. At the end of the first week, I had a list of 7 minor incidents. The second week, there were 12. The third week, 20. They were escalating. And they were careful, never catastrophic. Never enough to halt operations or trigger major alarms. Just friction. 1,000 tiny cuts designed to make the company bleed out slowly. This was not random. This was sabotage. My first thought was Marcus. A last desperate act of a man from the old guard. But the nature of the sabotage didn't fit his profile. This wasn't a sledgehammer. This was a scalpel. The incidents were happening across disparate systems, from logistics software to HR databases to financial reporting tools. The saboteur needed an intimate, foundational knowledge of Vanguard's entire digital infrastructure, a level of access and understanding that few people possessed. It's an inside job. I told Mara during our 8 a.m. video call. I had a dedicated screen in my office just for her, a permanent portal to my only trusted advisor. And it's sophisticated. Have you brought in a cybersecurity team? Mara asked, her brow furrowed. No, I said. I can't. The moment I do, it signals a major vulnerability. Our stock is still fragile. News of a coordinated internal sabotage campaign would be devastating. This has to be handled quietly, discreetly. Who's on your shortlist? I pulled up a file on my main screen. It was an old organizational chart from the company's founding days. A list of the original architects. Most had left years ago. Only 2 remained. The head of IT, a man named David Chen, and the lead architect of the company's proprietary logistics software, Pathfinder. The man who had designed it from the ground up thought the man was Julian. It can't be, Mara said, reading. My thoughts. Julian? He wouldn't have the will. From what you've described, he's a broken man. A broken man is still a man, I countered. And I've been monitoring his network activity. It's clean. Almost too clean. He logs in, he does his work, the tedious, humiliating work I assigned him, and he logs out. There are no unauthorized access attempts, no suspicious data transfers. Nothing. So it's not him, Mara concluded, or I said, my mind sifting through the possibilities. He's too good to be caught with simple network monitoring. He built the system, Mara. He would know the backdoors. He would know the blind spots in our security protocols because he's the one who designed them. The hollowed out calm. The unnerving placidity. It wasn't surrender. It was focus. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't accuse him. I had no proof. Only a pattern, a theory. I had to draw him out. I had to set a trap. The trap was Project Agon. Agon was the Greek spirit of contest and conflict. It was the new flagship project I had initiated to replace Julian's failed drone venture. A fully autonomous, AI-driven warehouse management system. It was the future of the company. My future. And it was my biggest vulnerability. Its code was the most complex, its success the most critical. If it were to fail, the company's reputation would be shattered. With the help of a trusted external programmer known to Mara, we created a honeypot. A single, deliberately flawed module deep within Agon's code. It was a subtle flaw, a logic bomb that would only trigger under a very specific set of circumstances. But to someone with the right knowledge, it would be an irresistible target. An opportunity to cripple my legacy before it was even born. We laid the trap. And then we waited. For 10 days, nothing happened. The small, random glitches continued, but Project Agon remained untouched. I started to think I was wrong, that my paranoia was creating patterns where none existed. The loneliness of command was beginning to wear on me, making me second-guess my own analysis. The confrontation, when it came, was not in the office. It was at the house, a place we now rarely occupied at the same time. I was working late, and he was supposed to be at a mandatory dinner with a legal team, finalizing a piece of the Belmont dissolution. I came home near midnight to find the lights on, and Julian was not in his guest room. He was in my study. My study, sitting in my chair in front of my monitors. The door was open. He wanted me to find him. I stopped in the doorway, my heart for the first time in months beating, a hard, frantic rhythm against my ribs. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was looking at me, and he was smiling. It wasn't his old, arrogant smile. It was something new, calm, triumphant, the placid look of a chess master who sees a checkmate 10 moves away. "Hello, Kira," he said, his voice soft. "Working late?" "What are you doing in here, Julian?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "A little work of my own," he said, gesturing to the main screen. On it was the code for Project Agon, and highlighted in red was the flawed module. The honeypot. My trap, I have to admit, he said, steepling his fingers. It was clever, a beautiful little logic bomb. Tucking it away in the resource allocation protocol. Very elegant. I almost missed it. The blood ran cold in my veins. He had not only found the trap, he was admiring its construction. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice ablade. "Want?" He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Oh, I don't want anything anymore, Kira. Wanting is for people who think they can win. I'm past that. You taught me that." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. The emptiness in them was gone, replaced by a terrifying, burning intelligence. "You took my company, you took my future. You took my name. You left me with nothing, and in nothing, I found a new kind of purpose. You're destroying the company," I said. "Your own legacy?" "No," he corrected me softly. "It stopped being my legacy the moment you put your name on it. Now it's just a machine." "You're a machine, and I am the ghost inside it. I know every circuit, every gear, every line of code. You think you're in control because you sit in the big chair, but I am everywhere else." He stood up and walked towards me, stopping a few feet away. He looked healthier than he had in weeks, energized, alive. The work of destruction was invigorating him. "Those little glitches," he said, a confessional tone in his voice. "A server reboot in Singapore that delays a shipment by 3 minutes, causing a ripple effect that costs you $80,000 in late penalties a week later. A single corrupted data packet in an HR file that changes an employee's bank details, causing a payroll crisis that takes 2 days to untangle. I'm not trying to blow the company up, Kira. That's crude. I'm simply uncreating it. One line of code at a time. I am introducing a state of perfect, untraceable chaos." He was a terrorist, and his weapon was the very company I now commanded. "You can't win, Julian." "I told you, I'm not trying to win," he said, his smile widening. I'm trying to make sure you can't. You can't fire me. The man who built the system? Fired for cause just as the system starts to fail. The investors would panic. The board would revolt. They'd see you as a failed leader who couldn't manage her own assets. And you can't fix it, because for every patch you create, I will find 10 more exploits. You are the queen of a kingdom that is slowly turning to sand beneath your feet. He had me trapped. My victory, the one I had planned with such cold, brutal precision, had given him a new, more insidious form of power. The power of the saboteur, the ultimate nihilist. So this is it, he said, spreading his hands in a gesture of finality. This is our new marriage. You on your throne, trying to build your legacy, and me in the shadows, making sure it slowly, painstakingly turns to dust. He walked past me, brushing my shoulder as he went. The casual contact felt like an electric shock. Good night, CEO, he whispered. I'll see you at work. I stood frozen in the doorway of my own study, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. I was in control of everything, and I was in control of nothing at all. The ghost was in the machine, and the ghost was my husband.